In this video, we're going to go over the interface. So first thing I'm going to do is connect to my machine. I brought out a different machine for this video. This one has two lasers on it. It has a 3.5 watt and an 800 milliwatt UV. So first thing I'm going to do, I can either hit connect here or I can go to GRBL and hit connect. It's the same symbol. And I know it connected because it gave me this message. Now this machine has a homing cycle. And if you do not have a homing cycle down here, what you can do is you can hit unlock. This is my homing cycle right here. Okay, this button. If you do not have that, you can unlock it. It's going to say message caution unlocked. Go to GRBL, hit GRBL configuration. What that's going to do is read all your settings. Okay? And now it knows all about your machine. It knows how fast it can move. It knows that laser mode's enabled. So now you can use M4 along with M3 to engrave. We'll talk about that more later. It has soft limits enabled, which means you have to home it before you can move it around much. It has a homing cycle enabled, so there's lots of things it just read. The most important part for the interface is it read register 22 has a homing cycle. So 1 means true. One means that, yes, it does have a homing cycle. So I'm going to close this. And if I didn't have this button before, I would have it now. If your machine doesn't have a homing cycle, then it won't show up. Okay, if it does have a homing cycle and you're not seeing the option, unlock the machine so it can read all the parameters. Go to GRBL here and GRBL configuration. That will tell the software that it has a homing cycle and add a button for you. So now that I have this, I can hit it. And you can see my lasers going in the back right. Goes there fast, pulls off a little bit, and then touches it gently, and then returns to the lower left. That's how I prefer to do it. Okay. So I went over this a little bit. So down here is how I manually move it. I can type in G code if I want up here. If I wanted to manually move it exactly, like let's say 33 millimeters, I can go G0 X33, and that's going to move it over 33 millimeters, right? But if I'm fine with these increments, then I can do that too. I'm going to hit home or go back to home. This is your homing cycle. This is your return to home. Okay. So I can move it. So right now it's set to 5. It's set to, there we go. 12,000 is my max speed on this one. So at 9,600 millimeters a minute, it's going to move 5 millimeters now. If I need to move it more at once, I can bring the slider up. Okay. If I want to move it slow for some reason, I can bring this way down and move it. Okay. So if you look over here, this is a stream of G code that this is sending. So look at our last command. So it was a jog command equals G91 X50. So it moved it to the 50, or moved DX plus 50 at a speed of, or a feed rate, the F, at a feed rate of 2802, 2,802 millimeters a minute. Okay? So if I were to hit down, we're going to see a Y negative 50. Right? G91 Y negative 50 at the same speed, at the same feed rate. Speed it all the way up, and I go to the upper right, it's going to have two commands. It's going to have X50, Y50 at that feed rate. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is tell it to return to home. Okay. Sent it right back home. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to move up and I'm going to set this as a new 0. So once I click this, it did a G92 X0 Y0 Z0. So now this point right here, where the laser's at, is the new 0 point. Okay. So if I were to move it away from there, and I were to tell it to go back home, it's going to come back to the new 0 point. Okay. Now mine, I can still go past that 0 point and reset home. And now I reset the original 0 point as a new 0 point. So if I move away from it and I tell it to go back to home, it goes back to that latest 0 point. Next thing I want you to look at is this little purple crosshair here. Okay. I'm going to move it up and to the right. You'll see this purple crosshair moved up and to the right. I'm going to move it to the right. The purple crosshair moved to the right. This gives you an estimate of where the head's at. Okay. So it knows from the 0 point about where the laser is, and it will show that up here, up top here. Even though globally I'm at negative 405 in X and Y negative 300, locally, or compared to my 0 point, I'm at 20 to the right and 10 up. Okay, X is left and right. Y is up and down. Okay? So my 0 point of the machine is in the upper right. So I'm always working in the negative area. That's what this means. This doesn't mean much to you guys, probably. It's just the local coordinates are what we're going to be really using. And then we have a feed rate and a spindle speed or laser power, depending on the machine you're connected to. Okay. So lower left is our moves. We also have a program info, which I'll be loading up a program in just a second and talk about those. Then we have our usual buttons here. These 4 or 3, depending on if you have a homing cycle. I made some custom buttons in another video and showed people how. So if I wanted, I can bring my laser up. I'll turn on my UV diode and I can focus it now. Right? See that little dot there? Okay. Turn the focus off. Turn on the bigger laser. Turn on my focus. So now I can focus my laser beam. Okay, so there's buttons down here. Lower right, these are overrides and status. I'll explain those once we load up a program also. Left side, this is our data stream. It throws commands. If you saw how I turned on focus, it sent a G1 F500, and to turn it off, M3S1, so it turned on the laser at 1 power. And then as I clicked it again, turned it off, it sent an M5, which turns off the laser. So what I'm going to do now is load up a program. So I went to File, and then Open File. And it's working on it. I think. There we go. So I'm going to scroll down to just a simple black and white one for this. So many choices. Let's go with Kirby. Kirby is a fun one. So I'm just going to line-to-line tracing. You can see the little lines here. If I use my UV, I should be going about 10 to 12. If I use my 3.5 watt, I should be going 8 to 10. So I'm going to keep it at 10 here. Okay. And yeah, keep it line to line. horizontal, because it can move this way much faster than it can this way. Right? It can move in the horizontal direction a lot faster because all it's moving is the laser heads. In the vertical direction, it has to move the motor, the arm here, or the gantry, the laser heads, all this stuff that way, up and down. So I'd rather engrave horizontally so it can jump over and keep engraving, jump over white space, keep engraving. Okay. So keep my brightness and contrast the same. I should probably put it in black and white, because if this has any variation whatsoever, it's going to send out a lot more data on the stream. I can explain that more in another video. But I'm going to keep it black and white because it is a black and white image. Okay? I'm going to magic crop it, or auto trim. Right? So now there's no margins. It's just right to the image here. Okay, hit next. And yeah, I'll do these things sort of small. Make them about 2 inches wide, or 50 millimeters wide. The engraving speed, yeah, we'll work with 1500. That should be a good one to work with here. It'll engrave just fine. So I'm going to use an M4 to engrave, M3 to cut, M4 to engrave. Okay, just keep that in your head when you're doing laser things. M4 to engrave, M3 cuts. Okay, and I'll keep my S-min there. I can explain that in another video too, how to figure out your S-min. But usually it's anywhere from like 8 to 20. Okay. Got my size set, got my speed set. Those are the important ones. I'm engraving, so I'm using M4. And I'm going to hit create. All right. So now I got a picture. Picture of Kirby here. Try to move that a little bit over. Okay. So here's Kirby. Now we have a little bit more data going on here. First of all, we have measurements on the side of our screen. Okay. So 0 millimeters, 10 millimeters, 20 millimeters, 30 millimeters, 40 millimeters, right? The top of my image is at 44 millimeters. It's 50 millimeters wide. I can tell that because it says 50 over here. It starts at 0, and it starts at 0 on the y-axis also. Okay? Lower left, it says it's 3,235 lines. It estimates it to take about 3 minutes. Okay? The buffer is currently empty. We'll see that fill up here. We're only going to run it one time. We don't want to run it twice. That'd be silly. If I were cutting, I might want to do 2 passes, right? If I want a nice clean cut, and I don't want to burn the trough, is what I call it, I'll do a few passes. But since we're engraving, I'm just going to do 1 pass, okay? I can change my mind in the middle of it. Like if it's not quite getting through, I can click the button while it's running. And then we're going to look at our overrides. They're all steady, and we'll open those in just a second. And machine is currently idle, okay? And these buttons don't work because the machine is idle. Okay, so I connected the machine. I loaded up a program. Now I'm ready to play. Well, just about ready to play. I'm going to move the laser over a little bit. And I'm going to use the UV diode, the one on the left here. Okay. I'm going to set my 0 point. And I'm going to do a perimeter run. So it did a square around where it's going to engrave. And that looks fine. Okay. So 0 set. Now I'm going to hit play, and we'll talk about what happens now. So now we have that stream of data on the left side, okay, as it's lasering. We no longer can use the manual move buttons. Of course, right? We don't want it moving randomly during the program. We also have a buffer now. So if your buffer ever empties, you might get a jitter. So this the controller back there, the GRBL controller, tries to predict how fast it needs to go and how much it needs to slow down to make sure it stops in time. It can do that with a buffer. If your buffer empties out, like you have way too much data going in at once, it can jitter a little bit. And if your machine's solid enough, chances are you won't even notice it. But if you have anything loose in your machine whatsoever, you might actually get little pieces of distortion, especially with text. If you have a lot of little text and you're running your buffer too low, you're going to get little distortion. Okay, up top here is our progress. Okay, so this bar doesn't show time left or time that has been run. It shows the amount of G code that's been run so far. So if your first bit of G code runs super fast and your last bit takes a long time, at the half point, you still might have a lot of time left because you're still running that slow G code. And then over here, now it's finally running that fast G code. So this isn't the amount of time left. It's not like, what would this be, 25%? It's not 25% of the time needed left. It's 25% of the G code has been sent to the controller. Okay, now we can also look in the lower right here. Now it changed to status run. Now it's running right now. Okay, now this button is available, the pause button. I can pause it. I can pause it here. And now the status says hold. I can also resume it. And it's going to start right back up. Okay. Pause. Resume. Okay. Now let's say it's not quite engraving the way I like. I can hit this override button here. I'm going to make this little window smaller so we can see all the overrides. Click that again. All right. So I can increase and decrease the power live during this. Okay. So do keep in mind, it's not instant, but it's almost instant. Okay. So if I were to change the power, it has to put that in the G code and stream it to the controller. And it's put at the end of the buffer. Okay. Which means you see this stream of data with the green check marks and the not green check marks. Well, once it puts it in there, it's got to get through all these not green check mark pieces of data first, and then it runs your override. Okay, so it's not instant. So if I were to change the linear to really slow, now it's going to start going slow. Okay, and I can change my rapid down too. So it's not instant, but it's pretty fast. And I can smell that now because it's engraving way too slow. Okay, so if I want to reset this, there's this little symbol on the side. I can hit that and it resets it. Now it's back up to speed. All right. Power, same thing. I can change the laser power live if I want. So if it's way too dark, I can bring that down. And I can see now it's not really doing much, actually. Okay. And I'm going to reset that back to 100. There we go. Now we're getting little smoke poofs. Oh, yeah, it did actually engrave it, just very lightly. I can see that. I'll lift it up to show you guys. Okay. Okay. So those are your overrides, which you can run live. And if you look really closely, you'll see this little purple cursor moving back and forth. You also see upper right where it thinks the head's at in the world, the current feed rate, okay, and the laser power. Now it doesn't update like constantly. It updates like looks like once a second. So if the laser is currently turned off and it's moving, it's not going to show. And it looks like my laser just... Huh. Laser just burnt out, maybe? I'm not sure what happened right there. I've had a few of these lasers come bad, where it only works for about 5 minutes. I can still see a tiny little dot, but it's not outputting correctly. The dot is coming back. There's no heat whatsoever here. Fan still works. Okay. I'm going to take a look at that. Oh, yeah. That laser's burnt out. Huh. Well, that's all right. Because now we're going to do the same thing with the higher power laser. And I will replace that in just a little bit and email the people that I bought it from. So I moved it a little to the right. I'm going to set 0. I switch to the higher power laser. Okay. And now I'm going to do a perimeter run. Okay, and now I'm going to hit play again. Now that is moving way too slow, okay? That is like eating it. There's lots of smoke being generated too. I don't know if you can see that. But yeah, there's just a ton of smoke happening. So what I'm going to do now is overwrite it. So I know I can go a lot faster. I can go at least double the speed. There we go. Okay. And smoke isn't too bad. There's still a little bit of smoke. Maybe I can bring the power down a little bit here. There we go. Okay. That's looking better. So, doing a black and white image, like, there's not much to lose, right? If I go too dark, it still looks dark. So, like, it'll be really hard to notice if I was going too slow or not because it's just a dark image. What this is really useful for is black and white. So, if I'm doing a black and white test image and I'm not getting the grayscale, sorry, if I'm doing a grayscale image and I'm not getting the contrast I want, I can speed it up and slow it down during the test piece and then keep track of that. So if I started it at 2000 millimeters a minute and it's still a little too dark, I can increase the linear at 2 times. Maybe 4000 was right. And so I'll keep that in mind. Okay, now that 4000 looks right. Now, when I load up the image to do the real thing, I'll do it at 4000 millimeters a minute. Okay, so that's overrides. That's, they're pretty useful. So if I were to click out of this, it sort of highlights it, right? Sort of shows that it's been changed. Keep this in mind. Okay, so let's say I change this and I reload another file. Well, it's not going to reset the overrides. So now that I reloaded the file at the correct settings, my overrides are still set like this. So I'm actually going to need to open this up and reset it before I start the next program. Okay. So the upper left is our file. The G code progress, not the time progress. Okay. It shows how long it's been running. It shows about how long it's going to take down here. How many times you're going to run this. I can run this a few times. Okay. Our move is grayed out because we can't do any moves. How many lines are in this file? A lot of our buttons are grayed out. We can still reset it. I can reset it live. Actually, I'll show you right now. It'll crash the system, but it'll reset a lot of stuff. Well, first of all, if I hit this, it asks me if I want to abort the current job, which is nice. I'm going to say no. I can abort it in the middle. But if something's going way goofy, I can hit reset right here. And it gave me a few errors here. So it says abort during cycle. It reset the controller. And the machine's relocked again. I can't move anything until I home it. Okay? It also reset all my overrides. So if I reset the controller, my overrides are also reset. Keep that in mind if you're depending on these overrides for your engraving to turn out correctly. So I'm going to home it. And I'm curious about the other diode here. So I'm going to see if it magically started working or not. Nope, definitely burnt out. Okay. I'm going to turn it up all the way. And yeah, just a tiny weak flittering dot, which means that diode gap is burnt out somehow. Okay. So, guess I'll be replacing that for the next video. But that's the end of this video. Thanks for watching.